Good evening and welcome. My name is Arnice Foster. I'm a member of the East Point College Park alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And I welcome you to Human Trafficking Make It Stop Part 2, a panel forum sponsored by the International Awareness and Information Committee in collaboration with our Social Action Committee. We have a diverse panel this evening that includes state and local government and law officials who will discuss the heinous existence of human trafficking. They will share the facts about the impact on our community and current laws and policies affecting both victims and predicators, pending legislation and programs for victims. During the panel discussion and the Q&A session that follows, we encourage the audience to ask questions and make comments using the chat box. Please feel free to engage in candid dialogue and share helpful information. We will be monitoring the chat boxes throughout the discussion and will get feedback and offer questions to the panel during the question and answer portion of the program. Before we begin our forum, I'd like to introduce our president, Cassandra Hayward Hines, president of the East Point College Park alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, who will bring our opening remarks.
Hello, I am Cassandra Hayward Hines, president of the East Point College Park alumni chapter, and it is with great pleasure to welcome you here this evening. Tonight's forum is part 2 of our educational event regarding human trafficking. It will cover signs of abuse, repeat offender challenges, and measures policymakers are taking to curtail this critical problem. My sincere appreciation to our collaborating committees, Social Action and International Awareness, for working together to host this educational forum to ensure our communities are informed and prepared to take action. We're also very grateful for our guest panel of legislators and law enforcement who will share their expertise and knowledge on legislation that has been introduced and being championed regarding human trafficking and the challenges here in the state of Georgia. And last but not least, a special thank you to our community guests for taking time out to join us this evening and receive this very informative and valuable information. So let's learn and let's be empowered to do something and to make it stop wherever it exists. So once again, on behalf of the East Point College Park Alumni Chapter, welcome.
Thank you, President Hayward Hines. Our moderator this evening is Ouleye Ndoye. As a global leader in the advocacy for women's rights and human rights, she has been featured in publications including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Ms. Ndoye has earned degrees from Spelman College, Columbia University, and graduated Phi Beta Kappa from the University of Oxford in the United Kingdom. Ms. Ndoye's study, training, and work have enabled her to travel and impact communities around the world, including Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, particularly in Cairo, Senegal, Tel Aviv, and Thailand's Golden Triangle, where she worked to rehabilitate victims of child sex trafficking and to prevent future exploitation on the borders of Myanmar and Laos. Appointed by former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms as the inaugural Senior Human Trafficking Fellow, where Ndoye collaborated with the Partnership for Freedom, forging a public-private partnership dedicated to end modern-day slavery throughout the world. Ms. Ndoye continues this important work today as a member of the Board of Directors of Wellspring Living, which provides residential and community-based care for victims of sex trafficking. It is my pleasure to introduce Ouleye Ndoye.
Thank you so much, Sora Foster and the East Point College Park Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. It is a pleasure to join you all today. And I want to thank all of you on the individual committees that brought this event together. President Hayward Hines, the International Awareness and Information Committee, and the Social Action Committee for bringing this important issue to light tonight. We are delighted to have a panel of experts on this issue locally with us tonight. And I'm going to ask that in order of the flyer, each of you unmute yourselves and just give a quick introduction. But what I'd like you to do as you introduce yourselves is also share when human trafficking became something that was on the spotlight in your individual work. Or it may be in your personal life that you first became aware of it, but tell us a little bit about how you came to be involved in this issue. And I'll start with Representative Debra Bazemore, Georgia House of Representatives for District 63.
Good evening to everyone. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for involving me in this conversation. And thank you to the Deltas. You all do phenomenal work. And I am honored to be a part of this portion. And for our presenter, Name, am I saying that correctly? She may not hear me. But I just want to say thank you so very much. And as it was said, I am State Representative Debra Bazemore, and I serve in the House of Representatives here in Georgia. I got elected in 2016. For those of you that may not be aware, I represent District 63, which is a portion of Fulton, Fayette, and Clayton counties. The reason that I got involved is because of my district. It starts at the exit, actually, when you pass the busiest airport in the world, Hartsfield-Jackson, and it goes into College Park, which houses over 30 hotels. You have 4 different ways to get off and on quickly. So I saw that as a concern. And when I sat in the chambers and heard the First Lady, Marty Kemp, say that she was going to take this on, I knew that we needed to be represented here in this area and protect our children. So I called the governor's office and I said, I want to be a part of this movement and this organization because it was so necessary. Because when they started to talk about it, they were talking about up north and the Johns and different things. And I said, no, you have to start in our area and really understand what's going on.
Thank you so much. That's great. I'm really grateful for your initiative and your service on this issue, and absolutely wish to echo that we've been really blessed in the state of Georgia to have leadership both in that of SOAR Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms on this issue, as well as First Lady Marty Kemp. And so I would say nationally, Georgia has definitely been on the forefront of this issue and leading the way. And it definitely takes representatives such as yourself and other elected officials and volunteer groups and nonprofits working together to make that stay the case. Next, I would like to invite Mayor Eric Dow, Town of Tyrone.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ndoye, and I'm very impressed by your resume. It's I'd love to get to know you better. It sounds like you could share a lot with me that I would like to hear. It's impressive. I've been serving in Tyrone since 2007 as a council member, and since 2011 as mayor. And we're very, very proud of Tyrone, and we have been named one of the safest cities in Georgia for many years. We recognize here that there are few issues that can be described any better as just one situation of human trafficking. Is too many. So even though we are known as a safe city, that doesn't mean that we rest on our laurels. So we try to stay vigilant about this issue, and it's something that our officers are trained on, and we try to stay aware of. And I'm sure we'll hear more about the law enforcement side of it, so I won't steal Chief Meadows' thunder. But it is something that we are vigilant on as a local, as a municipality. And it's a pleasure for me to speak with this distinguished panel. And I'm grateful to all of you who are giving of your time for this important issue. And I'm grateful to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Dahl. Next, I'd like to invite Councilwoman Helen Willis from the City of South Fulton, District 3.
Good evening, and thank you to the ladies of Delta Sigma Theta for doing everything that you can to educate and put an end to this immoral, indecent issue. I have been partnering with both chapters of Delta Sigma Theta to educate our residents about this issue now since 2018. I was elected originally to the inaugural council of the city of South Fulton in 2017. This issue was brought to my attention, and I must give credit to Chairman Rob Pitts. Chairman Rob Pitts reached out to several elected officials, local elected officials and municipalities across Fulton County to legislate and effectuate the hang the sign legislation. Well, when he approached me, I did not realize that human sex trafficking was one of the, Metro Atlanta was one of the major hubs for it, and it was in the top 10 when I did my research. I was appalled and I was sick because I could not believe that this was happening right up under our noses. And I was just so embarrassed that I didn't know anything about it. And so I not only did research, I started working with Youth Sparks. And Youth Sparks with Jennifer Swain, we partnered together to have several ambassador training programs. And we started an ambassador program, which is my legislation in the city of South Fulton. And I'm proud to say we have over 100 ambassadors now. And the ambassador program educate and train individuals about human sex trafficking. And not only does it train them about the issue, it also teaches them how to handle a victim if they were to ever encounter a victim. And so I want to thank the host for all the work that she does nationally to bring this issue to the forefront of everyone's mind. I have not worked with the governor's wife, Miss Marty Kemp, on this issue. I have been dealing with this issue locally and working hard with Chief Meadows. I am happy that this is one of her mantras and she is taking interest in this. But of course, our host, she was doing it before our First Lady of Georgia decided to take this issue on. And I remember when she was hired by the city of Atlanta. And I am proud of the work. And I'm glad that we are here today to talk about this issue in depth and educate many more about this immoral and this indecent act.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Councilwoman Willis. It's really great to have your attention on the issue now, and it's never too late, so don't be embarrassed at all. I think there may even be people on the call tonight who are learning about it for the first time. And so the most important thing is that once you learn something about it, that you don't forget about it. And so thank you for your commitment. Next, I'd like to invite Police Chief Keith Meadows of the City of South Fulton.
Yes, good afternoon, and I'd like to thank the ladies of Delta Sigma Theta sorority for hosting this event. Certainly, it's always a good thing when we can get education out to our citizens. My time in human trafficking actually goes back to 2002. Mayor Shirley Franklin appointed me to her roundtable discussion on the commercial exploitation of children. And during that time, we found out that Atlanta was actually a hub, a transportation hub for human traffickers coming through the area. And so we sat around and we brainstormed about a lot of different strategies during that time. I was over major crimes in Atlanta at that time, and human trafficking was one of the units that fell under my command. And so my time in human trafficking goes back a great deal. I also had the opportunity to work with Stephanie Davis, who did the studies on hidden in plain sight during that time. And so certainly we have a lot of knowledge about the activity in the city of South Fulton. One of my captains just texted me and said, make sure you let them know that we're the most knowledgeable department in the area, because everybody comes to us for information about that. I see Detective King, who is probably one of the strongest investigators on the event tonight, and he's recently made about 6 human trafficking cases, one involving a 14-year-old girl. And so we take it very seriously, and we make sure that we're doing thorough and methodical investigations as it relates to this activity, because as you go out and you look at the devastation that it causes in many of our communities throughout, not just in the Atlanta metropolitan area, but throughout the country. It's unfortunate, but it's more profitable for people to deal in human beings than it is in drugs, because you can sell drugs as a product that's gone one time, but you can sell human beings over and over again. And unfortunately, the laws haven't caught up with the activity. And I would like to see those penalties become stiffer in our state. And we lean on people like Representative Bazemore, because she's certainly been a strong advocate for us in South Fulton and around human trafficking. And I'm looking at Councilwoman Willis, who actually started the main initiative in the city of South Fulton, with respects to posting signs about human trafficking and making sure that we're educating our citizens. And so we want to make sure that the educational component is where it should be, and that the resources for a lot of these victims is constantly growing. I think when I first got involved in this topic, there was only 6 beds for victims in the state of Georgia. I don't know what those numbers look like now, but I certainly hope that it's increased significantly, because the one thing we found back in 2002, that we didn't nearly have enough resources for the victims of human trafficking.
Thank you so much, Chief Meadows. It's great to hear you bring up Stephanie Davis and Mayor Franklin. I know was very active on this issue long ago, along with many other women in our community that really began sounding the alarm on this back about,
Almost
2006.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at Spelman at that time, and I remember hearing about it at that time. And so coming back to Atlanta after working on this issue overseas and seeing how much further along we are is really, really heartburning.
Well, if you were at Spelman in 2006, then you're a baby.
I shouldn't have dated myself. I remember meeting Mayor Franklin. I remember hearing about the issue. And when I started working for Mayor Bottoms, Stephanie Davis was one of the first people to reach out and say, let me tell you where we left off with this back, when I was working on the matter, and give some ideas. And so she's still very active in the fight. So it's great. It's great to hear you bring them up. And actually, I want to ask you, while we have you unmuted, talk to us a little bit, because one of the questions that we're always receiving on panels and in the chats is, what do you do if you see a case of human trafficking? And so I worked closely with the Atlanta Police Department, and we were preparing for the Super Bowl and all the activation period, training 10,000 volunteers throughout the city. And it was a delicate balance between wanting people to report something, see something, say something, but also not flooding the lines with tips that may extend your resources in directions where they may not be best utilized. So could you speak a bit to the public about how you would advise handling?
So a lot of times people think that because they don't have concrete proof of the issue of human trafficking, that they shouldn't pick up the phone and call the police. Listen, I'm going to say this, because putting together an investigation, and I have Detective King, he's on the call as well. It's like putting together a puzzle. You might have one little small piece of information that you give to the police department, and enough calls will help us to piece those puzzles, put the pieces of the puzzle together. Some of the things that you should really look for is if somebody's exercising a great deal of control over another individual, if they're holding that person's ID, or if you ask them a question, they're speaking for that individual. People are always on their cell phones now, and you could take video of an incident without people actually knowing. You know, we would encourage you to even do that. Right now in the city of South Fulton, we have an app that'll allow you to upload a video and still photographs to us. And so when you see those things, make sure you pick up the phone. You're very descriptive. A lot of times you don't think that the dispatcher is in the process of sending someone because they're asking you so many questions. But what they're essentially trying to do is get that information and relay as much information to our responding officers as they possibly can. And so a lot of times people get frustrated because they don't think somebody's on their way, but the dispatchers are trained to ask certain questions with respects to human trafficking and among other things. And so exercising control is the biggest thing that you'll see traffickers do. They'll have their IDs, they'll have their wallet, they'll have their valuables, and they'll give them these things intermittently. And so that, and when you see people constantly looking at the ground when someone's guiding them or directing them, those are the sort of things that you need to be mindful of. Now, I know you're going to get into some other questions, and I don't want to jump forward because when we talk about the industries, there's some things that you can look for there as well. And I'll go over those when we get to
Okay.
The other question.
Perfect. Yes, we'll get to that for sure. Thank you so much. I'd like to direct the next question to Representative Bazemore. If you wouldn't mind speaking to a couple of Georgia Senate bills, and I don't want to put you on the spot, so I'll give you a selection and you pick whichever or all if you'd like, but Senate Bill 33, Civil Remedies for Victims of Human Trafficking, as well as 34, the name change for survivors of human trafficking, and 287, adding human trafficking awareness to Georgia health standards. What do you see as the impact of these bills on human trafficking and perhaps limitations?
So House Bill 33, it is actually in favor of the victim, and it will allow the victim to recover damages and attorney fees. And if the victim is younger than 18 or when they hit 18, they don't have to bring the charges. It allows the Attorney General to, if there's reasonable cause, he can take it up based on the offense to the state of Georgia and obtain some relief. So that's what House Bill 33 does. House Bill 34 is, let me see. Okay, this one is, and I was a signer on this bill. It was to allow those that are victims to easily change their names after they are recovered and it be sealed. And that's for their protection, because we do know that those predators will try to seek them out again. And once they're out, this way, their name is sealed and it's changed. So that's what that bill was meant to do. And I think the last one you said was 287. And so that bill actually was requiring the State Board of Education to put in its curriculum a course for human trafficking awareness for ages grades 6 to 12. And it would be included in the health and physical education course. So that's what those three bills do. And if I could just add, I didn't expound at the very beginning, but if I could just add the fact that when I was chief of staff for one of the state senators, and this goes back maybe 2010 or even earlier than that, we had First Lady Dollar was working on this issue. And she came to Senator James's office, and we discussed this at different meetings, and to see how we could help work this situation out and give our support to this effort. And so because of that, when I had hosted the First Lady of Georgia, Marty Kemp, 3 times in my district, in College Park, as a matter of fact. And I did thank you to Chief Meadows and the chiefs of College Park. I invited them there also to sit and have discussions, and to several different, the DA came, the superintendent of schools, because we do know that there are students recruiting students. And so I needed him there also to make him aware. He was not aware that this was taking place. And so the sheriffs were there. So I tried to include every entity that would have anything to do with this. And I was quite pleased that the first time that I hosted the First Lady, we set up a sting. A sting was set up, and she was quite surprised and excited to be a part of that. And so she could see how, you know, a predator would act. And I heard you ask what can be done? So I don't know if everybody knows on the call that there is a national hand gesture that children can use that are in trouble to make someone else aware that they are in trouble and they need your help. And so just continuing to do this. And there have been different ones that have been rescued because people are aware that that is the national sign that they're in trouble. In addition to, I heard you talking about the Super Bowl when it was here. So when those literature was placed in the hotels and things, so the predators got wind of it, and they went in and they took it out to make sure that those victims were not aware, which is unfortunate. And I don't know if you're aware of the phone number. The national hotline number is 866-363-4842. And so besides these bills here that you mentioned, I am actually also working with Senator Klobuchar, and we are tracking bills that are moving through Congress with regards to human and sex trafficking. And I'm trying to advocate for some more funds and resources to be brought here. So this is not only at a state level I'm working, but at a national level, so that we can combat this problem that we are faced with. And because, and I don't know if I said this, College Park has over 30 hotels. And we found that hotel owners are very aware of what's going on, and they're allowing it because it's about the money. And so at one of the times that I hosted the First Lady and everyone else, we talked with the mayors to really have a stiff penalty to those hotel owners, because they're aware of what's going on and they're allowing it. So that's in play also.
Yeah, that's great. And you actually led me to my next question. You brought up mayors, and we're lucky that we have a mayor on the call. So I would love to direct it now to the city level. If you could speak a little bit about what you see as your kind of role in this as a leader of a city, and the ways in which you're able even to engage businesses. She mentioned hotels and all the great work that's happening on a state and a national level. But as we know, all of these crimes happen on a local level first, right? They're connected throughout cities and states and even countries. I first started working on this issue in Thailand, as you heard earlier tonight. And I was shocked when I started working at the city of Atlanta, just how much the issue was identical. Different languages, different nationalities, somewhat different cultures in terms of how young women are expected to conduct themselves, but ultimately the same kinds of business dealings are what allow this to take place. So what can you do as a mayor? And after you finish, I'd like Councilwoman Willis to answer the same question from your perspective of South Fulton. So,
Well,
Mayor.
thank you very much. The first thing that I wanted to do was to learn. I saw that it was clear I needed to educate myself on this and to better understand what kind of a problem do we have here in my city, what kind of a problem do we have in the county, and then what kind of a problem do we have in the Southern Crescent and outward. I kind of grew it out. And so I interviewed my police chief, I interviewed our sheriff's department, and I even spoke with the Atlanta Regional Commission. They have a center that works with Homeland Security. And I just worked out kind of the layers of an onion to learn. Our county is not connected to an interstate. Now, Tyrone is only about 5 miles or less from an interstate, but I'm told that a big advantage for this subject is that we are not connected to an interstate. We don't have truck stops. And many on this call, you do have to work with that. So it kind of brought me back to education is what we have to be doing. Putting up signs in popular spots. We have those signs up, and there's a national hotline and there's a state hotline, and so we try to educate that way. And then I think my next step would be for us, specifically for us, is to ask, how can we help if we're not dealing with this issue too much in our municipality or our counties? How can we help our neighbors who are having to deal with it more? I'm big on working with neighbors, and so that might be an on the side conversation with somebody specific on this call. But how can we help? And if it's not a dire problem here, then what can we do to help our neighbors? So that's how my city is handling it.
That's great. Thank you so much. Councilwoman?
So here in South Fulton, I've been on the forefront of this since 2018. And what I have done is made a policy for all businesses to display the signage in their business, so that if anyone were to encounter a victim or a victim needed help, they have on the sign the National Trafficking Resource Center. That number is 1-888-373-7888, and I will place that in the chat. And also they have a Georgia hotline for domestic minor trafficking, 1-844-842-3678. I will place that in the chat. So that it is a law in the city of South Fulton that every business must have this sign displayed. Now, I will be working with Chief Meadows. We have instituted some funds in our traffic camera funding, where we will purchase these signs, and we will go out and partner with organizations such as First Lady Taffy Dollar. She has partnered with me to educate residents about human sex trafficking, and we're planning to take knock on business doors and make sure that they understand that this is a law in the city of South Fulton and these signs must be displayed. We are going to find businesses if they don't have this sign displayed. And I think the minimum fine is $100. Also in South Fulton, I also legislated a policy, and we have a human sex trafficking ambassador program. What I found is that a lot of individuals just did not want to talk about this topic. They did not want to embrace this topic. They did not want to believe that this was happening in their community. So I partnered with a lot of local churches. Siloam Church International has partnered with me. The Eden Church has partnered with me, Kingdom of God. And we go into our faith-based communities. Also, we partner with our civic organizations, Delta Sigma Theta. Both chapters, the Atlanta chapter and the East Point chapter, have partnered with me. And we have hosted human sex trafficking ambassador training programs where we partner with Youth Sparks. They come in, they do the training, and then upon completion of the training, you are awarded a certificate. The training is about 2 hours. What I plan to do is to partner with Chief Meadows, and we plan to use these ambassadors to go to these businesses to make sure these signs are displayed and educate our business owners why it's important for these signs to be displayed in their business. Look, in City of South Fulton, we have every highway that touches us. We have 285, we have I-20, we also have 85 north and south that touch us. It is a good thing, but it also is a curse in a lot of ways, because while we are very accessible to a lot of things, it also breeds sometimes unwanted, it has unintended consequences, and it brings unwanted crimes, such as this immoral and indecent act, which is human sex trafficking. And so I think that as long as we are educating our residents about it, we are making sure that we are displaying the signage, we are educating our businesses about it. It may never go away, but we can minimize it. And we can make sure that we not only teach people how to look for the signs of human sex trafficking, but we also teach them how to deal with the victim, because we don't want the victims to be shamed. We don't want them to feel that they are prostitutes. We want them to feel comfortable enough to come to us and let us know that they are victims, and we need to know how to help them.
Thank you so much. You raised some really good points. And one of those is something that every city in the state of Georgia should be doing, is hanging those signs, especially in government facilities. And one place that I'd really like to see them is in park and recreational centers where children are swimming, where people are, prior to COVID anyway, and, engaging in basketball practice and other sports, those bathrooms, those rec centers, those gyms, as well as in government buildings where people go every day to handle regular traffic tickets and things of that nature. In the bathrooms, in every stall, we should have those signs. And that's something that I oversaw at City Hall between 2018 and 2021. So thank you for raising that, as well as the fact of the intersection of highways. Something that I often dispelled the myth on panels is that Atlanta is the hub for human trafficking because we have the world's busiest airport. That is not the case. We all go through security and we can't even bring our water bottle. Half the time they throw out my kids' yogurt. I mean, it's hard to, I'm not saying trafficking does not happen on airlines, because it absolutely does. And that's why Delta's taken a lead in training their flight attendants as well as other airlines. But it's much easier to traffic people in trucks and cars and gas stations, especially off Fulton Industrial Boulevard as well, are major places where you should keep your eyes open, where those signs should be hanging if you're able to ensure that. I know Fulton Industrial is kind of complicated because part of it is the city of Atlanta, part of it is South Fulton. And so we really need all the cities to work together in those corridors to have jurisdiction and make sure that the signs are hanging, that the places are being monitored, that suspicious activity is uncovered. And 75, 85, and 20 East and West really connects a large percentage of this country. Oftentimes we see instances of vans that are supposed to be carrying cargo between businesses actually carrying people. And so that leads me to one issue that I should raise tonight, and that is the issue of labor trafficking. I think sex trafficking definitely gets its fair share of coverage, but we should also remember, especially as we get further out of the city of Atlanta, that there are lots of farms in Georgia. There's lots of labor that comes from other countries. And when an immigrant labor situation occurs and their visas expire, sometimes those employing them don't allow them to leave or aren't paying them due wages. And so that's what we call labor trafficking. Labor trafficking and sex trafficking often overlap. We have reports of those who've been sexually victimized on farms and are not always privy to the kinds of care and services that a US citizen would have available to them. So the issue is deep, it's complicated, it's intersectional and overlapping. I currently help with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council for the state of Georgia. It was founded in 2015, and work with them as a policy advisor on some agricultural labor matters. And some of you may have read about a bust that happened on a farm back in November. It became public last month, and that's the kind of work that we try to do in partnership with federal law enforcement agencies and local law enforcement. And so if you see people that look like they're overworked and underpaid and not leaving a certain area, if you're in the rural areas, that's also something to keep an eye out for. As well as labor that happens inside the home. It could be cases, you see this a lot in California, for example, of nannies or live-in housekeepers that aren't allowed to leave the premises and aren't paid their fair share for their work. And so I just challenge you all to look beyond domestic minor sex trafficking, look at the fact that adults can be trafficked as well. You don't have to be a minor to be a victim. You don't have to even be a woman. I think a lot of times we have this preconceived notion in our mind of what a victim looks like. And so I just had to add that. And I'm going to invite Keith Meadows to speak on some of the issues that I just raised, because I'm sure that you've come across it in your career.
So I heard you mention Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, and I will tell you the role that it does play. And so, no, typically you don't traffic victims in and out of the airport, but one of the things Atlanta is known for is our convention, that we're a convention city. The whole area is a convention region. And so essentially what happens when you have all of these conventions come to town, you'll see increased trafficking through certain hotels. And let me tell you what I did during my time in Atlanta. We had this algorithm that we used, and we looked for unusual trafficking patterns on certain websites like Craigslist, Plenty of Fish, Backpage, and all of these different websites. As you could imagine, a great deal of the trafficking occurs on the internet. And if you look at the sheer magnitude of some of the trafficking that takes place on the internet, it's almost like when you're trying to do enforcement, it's like throwing a pin in the ocean, because there's so many different websites. You have all of these different escort sites, and they hide the children among those sites. And so it becomes important for you to try to create strategies around identifying the youth that are hidden among these escorts on a lot of these different sites. And so as we look at the different industries that take part in trafficking, you're looking at nail salons, you're looking at massage parlors, you're looking at the hotel industry. I think Representative Bazemore mentioned that earlier. You're looking at I think I said hotels already. And so when you look at a lot of these different industries and the part that they play into it, many of them don't directly impact trafficking, but they certainly aid and abet the activity itself. And so it becomes important for us to have really comprehensive strategies aimed at identifying these victims. Now, one of the paradigms that had to take place in law enforcement, and this took place many years ago, was we had to stop looking at these people as criminals. We had to start treating them as they were, as victims. And so, believe it or not, that took a long time to change that culture in law enforcement. We're still not where we need to be, But at the end of the day, what a lot of police officers are confronted with is an unwilling or an uncooperative victim in many of these cases because they're afraid of their oppressors. And so it becomes important for us to build that sense of trust and legitimacy among these victims. And it's hard to do. Your only viable alternative is incarceration. And so you heard me talk about resources earlier. It becomes extremely important that if we say we're going to save them from their oppressors, then we have to have a course of action beyond what we see and them engaging in sex acts or other illicit activity. And so it's extremely difficult. And I still don't know that the resources are there. I think we're getting better since I got into the issue back in 2006, but we're still nowhere near where we need to be in terms of being able to, provide these sort of resources to these victims. I love what Representative Bazemore did with the you having the ability to change your name. That's extremely important because I mentioned earlier, they take the identifications of many of these victims, they hold them over their heads. And so being able to do that and then have the resources coming in to take them somewhere out of that environment that they're in becomes extremely difficult. And you wouldn't think so when you look at human trafficking as a $40 billion a year industry. It's $40 billion a year, and it's almost 300 million in Georgia alone. And so those numbers, I don't know how new they are, but it was 300 million about 8 years ago. And so, I could imagine that number is constantly going up. And so I don't believe that we're keeping up with the magnitude of the problem when we talk about resources and what's needed. We're certainly pointed in the right direction. But if we're going to be that sort of model for the rest of the country, we have to look at ways that we can actually create pathways for many of these victims coming out of human trafficking. And the legislation is certainly a start.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad you raised conventions. That's something that we talked about a lot the year of the Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl got obviously a lot of attention, but something that a lot of folks in law enforcement were telling me that year is, they should look at the Poultry Convention and all these other conventions that come to town because we have an influx of trafficking and traffic on Fulton Industrial at those times just as much. And so those are annual events.
Can I answer this one question that I see in the chat?
You might be about to go right ahead of me, but that.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Which one do you want me to direct to, though?
Beverly Green.
Yeah, that's where I was going. See, we're right
okay,
here.
I know. Okay.
I'm going to read Beverly's question because I've highlighted here for a few minutes now. So it's a really good question. It's something that that we get from hospitals quite a bit. So I'll just read it now. How does the Human Trafficking Task Force work with possible victims in the hospital setting? We had a 14-year-old female present in my hospital with a man she referred to as her uncle, but he quickly left and another woman returned and stated that she was the mother. However, this woman did not appear to be concerned when the patient received a new diagnosis of HIV status. Is there a protocol when working closely with possible victims in the hospital setting? Should the hospital's social services team contact the National Hotline or Resource Center? And so 2 minutes on that.
So they should contact that center. But one of the things we did during my time in the city of Atlanta, and I don't know if they still do this or not, but we had an on-call human trafficking investigator. They had a cell phone, and at every one of the nursing stations, it was disseminated. That was one of the resources that they had available to them, so that if they had a victim of human trafficking, they were able to call those national hotlines, but then they were also able to get an investigator that was trained in facilitating human trafficking investigations. And so I don't know if Atlanta still does that model, but we would give that investigator a take-home call, and they would literally go out to the hospital, sit down, talk to that victim, and try to figure out ways to facilitate the investigation. And so that worked out really well for us during my time there. But I do have Detective King on the line, and he does very good about going beyond initial leads that he receives. And so as we get leads that are coming in from the hospital, they're always assigned to Detective King, and he does the initial follow-up, and then we start involving the additional resources from there. But contacting the national hotline is your first step. And if Atlanta still does that protocol where they send someone out, because we have a state match task force, and many investigators are assigned to that state match task force, and they're responsible for responding to those incidents.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for your service on that. And thank you to Detective King, if you're listening, for being on the ground, because we really need that. We need more people doing that. I want to address a few things that have come up, and that's statistics as well as phone numbers. You see, I've put a couple numbers in the chat, and we've also heard a couple numbers from our panelists today. These are all great numbers to write down and to keep with you. And one of the reasons that it's so hard to have statistics on human trafficking is because there are so many numbers. There's far more numbers than we've shared tonight. Many nonprofits have their own numbers. And it's great that there are many people that are ready and waiting at the phones to respond to these issues. But obviously data doesn't get shared always in all of the ways. And so keep in mind that these numbers are statistics, they're estimations. It's hard to quantify undercover crime and how many people it's affecting. But it's always good to have these as markers. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is great to post, in part because they have advocates that speak hundreds of different languages available. And so in instances where the victim is not a United States citizen and does not speak English, they have help available. They're also very much connected to police stations throughout the country. And so they'll make sure that the right advocates are aware that the right nonprofits that have beds available can assist. If it's intervening, it'll be a combined effort. The police may intervene, ID the people that are claiming to be parents or uncles of a victim at a hospital, and then direct them to a shelter such as Wellspring Living, where I serve on the board. And there are dozens of beds there, far more than 6 that there may have been in 2006. And they're always growing. And so oftentimes people ask, well, how can I help? What can I do to help? Donate to a shelter. You know, they are housing, they are providing therapy for victims, they're coordinating with law enforcement, and they're really directly interfacing with victims every day. Volunteer on a task force, the CJCC that I mentioned, cjcc.ga.gov, has task forces that you can join depending on your line of work, either as a full partner member or as a volunteer. And there's always a need for people to help to do research and to connect the dots. I see that State Representative Bazemore has been patiently waiting with her hand up, and I do want to make sure we give you some time to share what's on your mind.
Thank you so much. As I was listening, I was getting so excited because a lot of those subject matters is things that I've been working on. And just to let everybody know what Chief Meadows said about Atlanta, I'm really excited about that because I met with the First Lady and the mayor, the new mayor, Andre Dickens, a couple of weeks ago, and we had a sit down, had a discussion about this. The reason I called the meeting was because I had spoke to the gentleman, the VP of Atlanta, Delta Airlines, and what I had proposed to him was that the PSA that the First Lady had done, we could then incorporate it when they give their instructions. And so they were very pleased and receptive to that idea. And we talked more about it. And that is moving forward. And so hopefully, I'm glad Chief Meadows brought up what was already existing at one point in Atlanta. So I will have that discussion with Mayor Dickens and make sure that that continues. And also to make sure that you are still working with Atlanta, because we definitely need you, your experience and your passion and your understanding of this problem. I also wanted to make sure that you all knew that This affects 159 counties. That's the whole state of Georgia. That is one discussion that we did have when the three of us sat down, is that people think because, you know, Atlanta's so large, the airport's there, it's not really touching or affecting my county or my area. That's not true. And the First Lady told us a story that someone said to her when she said it was in 159 counties. They didn't believe it. And not until there was a child found in their county. And then they believed, because their county, of course, it wouldn't happen here, but it did. And so they believe. So we have to address it every single county and be diligent about it. And also, you know, that PSA is also going to go on television so that we can make sure that is publicized and everybody knows about it. The signage that was in the airport, that's going to be more visible, because we got wind that some of them were taken down, I guess, during the pandemic, but we are going to make sure they're put back up and put in places where it's very visible, especially when you come up that escalator. And that's where, so the PSA was Tyler Perry did a PSA. And now we're going back to him to ask him to do another one for us. And so instead of just hearing as you're walking through the airport, if you see something, say something. I can tell you, I know what it's about, but most people are just trying to get to their gate. They're trying to get to their luggage. They're trying to get out of the airport. But if you have a Medea or a Tyler Perry saying something, people will stop and they will listen. And so that's what we're working on right now, to make sure that people will stop and listen.
Absolutely. I see a couple of things in the chat, and obviously we're coming up on our hour, but there's one thing we should definitely touch on before we go, and that is how technology is used to recruit youth. That's a whole area that we could spend a whole nother hour on, but we don't have that tonight. We have, I'm sure, many parents on the line, aunts and folks that are interfacing with young children. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they think I'm too strict about the iPad and things like that, but it's because I know it's a window to the entire world. Gaming, social media, even things that seem innocent like Instagram or Facebook also have messenger apps, and people can pretend to be folks that they're not. And I was wondering if I could invite anyone on the panel right before we go into closing remarks, which will be very brief, just to touch on anything about technology. And I see Councilwoman has her hand raised. And so we're going to give you this question. And then in the 30 seconds that each of you says your final remarks, if you'd like to touch on the subject of technology, I invite you to do so after she concludes answering.
Okay, Sora Ndoye, before you move forward with that, we do have at least about 20 more minutes where we're going to open up for questions from the audience. Okay. So if, as we wrap up with Councilwoman Willis, we can move right into getting the questions from the chat and from our Facebook Live.
Okay, perfect. When you said to wrap up at 8, I didn't know we were going to move to the audience, so that's even better. So now we can relax a little bit and talk about these issues of technology, which are humongous. Go ahead, Councilwoman Willis. You're muted. Can't hear you very well now. Nope, we're not hearing you. Your microphone says that it's muted. Perhaps while you get that set up, just raise your hand again when you have it worked out. Does another panelist want to touch on technology?
So I just wanted to say that
the host wouldn't let me.
We are actually working on legislation to make sure that we regulate technology, because we do know that that is easy for any predator to access and to convince children. So every piece of legislation we're working on, and let me say this, because the First Lady, and at this juncture, and because of this situation, I don't look at R's, which is Republicans. I don't look at D's, which is Democrat. I look at resources. And this woman has the resources and she's willing. We don't have to create the wheel. It's already there. So money is being put in the budget every single year. It's being increased. So that can then be disseminated to each county, each person to combat this issue.
Oh, thank you. I could not unmute the host. It said that the host had to unmute me. So I was trying to unmute myself and I couldn't unmute myself.
We're here now. Thank you.
I'm muted now. So one of the things I loved about Youth Sparks is that they have a whole segment on technology and how children are being lured in through technology. One of the things as a parent I did, and that's one of the reasons I love Verizon, because you have parental controls. You want to make sure that you are making sure you know, check your children's phone. Make sure that you have parental controls. Don't buy them a phone without parental controls. Make sure that you explain to them that it's against the law to not only to they call it sexting. It's against the law to sex. Make sure that when they're playing video games and they're gaming, when they're out here playing with anyone, because now you can play with anyone cyberly, that they understand that if anyone is asking them questions that that doesn't sound right, like where do you live? Meet me at the park. Make sure that they understand the language. Also, you know, the way that we get information out, you see it through campaigns, it's it's not sexting, it's texting. I send out text information to my constituents about how to join council meetings, how to send out information. I think that one of the things that the city of South Fulton, and I'm going to talk with Chief Meadows about, is making sure that we send out information through a text method to our constituents, the national hotline, letting them know when we have ambassador training in the city of South Fulton. Look, I think that we're going to have to take a comprehensive approach to human sex trafficking. It's great that money and resources are being pushed down from the state level, but by the time we see resources on the local level, sometimes the problems are too far ahead. So I am grateful to Chief Meadows. I'm glad that he's not waiting on those state resources. I'm glad that we are tackling the problem head on. COVID won't let us be great. We are going to, when the COVID numbers go down, again, work with our human sex trafficking ambassadors. We're going to go take the grassroots effort. We're going to do grassroots efforts. We're going to go knock on doors of businesses. We're going to make sure these signs are displayed, and we're going to hold business owners who don't have the signs displayed accountable. And we're going to continue working with the faith-based community. We're going to continue working with civic organizations. We're going to continue working with our residents to educate them about this immoral and indecent crime. And right now we have 100 ambassadors. It is our goal to have thousands of ambassadors right here in the city of South Fulton, because we have 108,000 residents. So there's no reason why we can't continue to educate in order to combat this indecent and immoral act of crime.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So I want to pivot a bit to talk about a few things that have come up in the chat. A recent question was posed: as a young lady in her 20s, how can we become more aware and spot another young woman like myself who is being trafficked? And so let's talk a bit about trafficking in the schools. In the schools, it could be the middle schools, the high schools, the colleges. I worked for a semester, gosh, what year was this? 2017, I want to say, At Spelman, I had lunch with the dean who had encountered this in the freshman dorm. A student was moved in, going to classes, looked like, a high school senior transitioning to college. And within a matter of a month, all of a sudden was coming back to the dorm with full-blown nails and hair and totally different wardrobe than what she'd noticed a month prior. And then started getting reports that she wasn't in her classes. She'd show up maybe Friday or Saturday, Sunday, Monday with a suitcase and be gone again. And what ended up coming to light is that she'd been trafficked into a high-class escort service. And so, these things happen on very privileged campuses. It really doesn't matter about socioeconomics or education level, race, religion, color, none of it happens to the best of us. And so would anyone on the panel like to speak to how the intersection of the education system and trafficking occurs and what someone can do if they recognize signs among their peers? I see Keith Meadows is already off mute, so.
Yes, so you'd be amazed that there are children recruiting other children into sex trafficking right now. We had some teenagers that were pimping other girls at trafficking arena. I mean, it's amazing some of the things our children are confronted with right now, and most of it is coming from social media. I saw, someone ask, is a lot of that driven by social media? You have people that are internet famous now. They are TikTok famous. They do all of these different videos, and then they present children with the idea of becoming a model or going to a photo shoot or something of that nature. And then the next thing you know, we're getting a missing persons report on that particular juvenile. And that was another talking point one of my captains just sent me. A lot of these cases start off as missing persons cases. And then we wound up finding out, and as we began to follow up, we find out that they had been lured into this trafficking life. And so it's really important to educate our kids around the strategies that many of these people use to try to lure them into that lifestyle. It might be through making internet videos. It might be through photo shoots. It might be through, modeling or any number of things that they use to try to get these kids into that arena. But they use it, and a lot of these kids see instant success. I had no idea some people got paid for those TikTok videos. People are making a lot of money supplementing incomes. They just said some seniors are doing TikTok videos to supplement their income now. And so it's easy to lure them in with all of the different things that you could buy from these sort of initiatives that are taking place on the internet. And so we just need to be mindful. And I think you said it, you saw somebody coming in with their nails done, their hair done. Listen, when I was in college, I had 2 nickels to scrub together, and I didn't have enough money to get my hair cut half the time. But, at the end of the day, you know who those people are that struggle, because I went from room to room begging for money sometimes when I needed it. And so, we had some young women when I was in college that were in the strip clubs, paying their tuition, and they were lured into that. And sometimes you really don't know, a person's circumstance until you have the opportunity to sit down and really talk with them, about it and why they're in that predicament. And so we really have to kind of open up the dialogue and be prepared to have really tough discussions around this issue.
And if I can add also, thank you, Chief Meadows. If I can add, that's the reason why I had the superintendent of Fulton County Schools present at the last meeting that I had, because those students are recruiting other students, and they look for those students that are having trouble. The students that maybe have one parent that might be working 2 jobs, they're not getting the attention. Those students that maybe there's abuse going on in the home, those students that are withdrawn. So those are the things that not only we as adults in the community that are working right now on it. But the superintendent was not aware. And so he needed to be made aware so that he could allow his staff to be aware of what it is and what to look for. And so that they can help each and every one of us as we work to combat this problem.
I'd also just like to bring attention to the fact that, if you suspect trafficking of children, in addition to the hotlines, DFACS is always a first place to look. They conduct home investigations and are very thorough about that, working closely with law enforcement. And so some of you may feel overwhelmed with all the different numbers and places to call, but hopefully our source can gather the information that's been put in the chat and share those with everyone who registered today. I want to invite anyone to add additional questions to the chat. This will be our time for the next 5 to 10 minutes to pose it. And I see that Ms. Foster has her hand raised.
Yes, there were a few questions I wanted to direct to Councilwoman Willis and one for State Rep Bazemore. Councilwoman Willis, where can we obtain the signs? How does someone become an ambassador? And is this information available on the City of South Fulton's webpage?
So you can obtain the signs from our police department. They have them. So any one of our police precincts should be able to get you a sign. You can also print them. There is through our legislation, our ordinance and municipal codes, you can go and print them. But I would prefer for you to pick them up through from our police department because they are colored and they have the seal on them. They have use sparks and the city seal and the state seal on them. Also, I typically try to have ambassador programs twice a year. And so I will probably be doing another ambassador program in June. We have had to do them virtually since the pandemic won't let us be great, and won't let us, so we've been doing them virtually. I am hoping that we can go back, we can do a in-person one at Walker Park or either at one of our Southwest Art Center. If you are a member of a church and you would like for me to bring the ambassador program and you're in the city of South Fulton, we will be happy to bring Youth Sparks in and do the ambassador program at your church. That's what a lot of the churches did in South Fulton. Again, Siloam, they had about 50 people to show up. And Enon, they did one with youth and they had about 30 teens to show up. And so if you would like for us to partner with your church, we'll be happy to do that as well.
Thank you. And I see Mayor Dow.
And I'll put my information in the chat. I'm sorry.
Mayor
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to add something to that question?
I would like to ask a quick question, and I'll try to word it so that it's a quick response. It's my officers, one challenge that they have voiced is that trying to determine where that fine line is between reasonable suspicion and what would be called parental rights. Is there any, this is either a question for Representative Bazemore or for Chief Meadows, is that a challenge that's faced universally for law enforcement? And if so, is there any discussion about touching on that subject in legislation?
So I'm trying to draw a correlation. Between reasonable suspicion and you said parental rights?
What the excuse would be by a trafficker, that is my child, you cannot talk to my child to ask them questions, like such as, are you uncomfortable you being told to do anything against your will, that kind of thing. But an officer would have the ability to ask questions with reasonable suspicion. So there's that fine line in there that is a challenge for them to stay on.
If you suspect that a child is the victim of any type of act, you have an obligation at that point to go forward. Now, we do have the ability to do forensic interviews with those children, and if need be, we could go to the courts to make that happen. But at the end of the day, we don't have the luxury of just allowing, a parent to say that's it when you have that reasonable suspicion that that child has become a victim of such a heinous act. And so I would encourage your police officers to get with the district attorney's office, run the facts by them before, and they'll help them with the paperwork if they needed to facilitate a forensic interview. I have Detective King on the line. I don't know if he can unmute or not, because I think he just recently went through this. And one of the things, Representative Bazemore, that I would like to see is we've taken it out of the hands of domestic violence victims for prosecution. And I don't think that's completely out of the question for human trafficking victims as well. As I said earlier, many of these victims are afraid of their oppressors. And so it becomes important for us to have those sort of laws that have a little teeth into them, that gives us the ability to go beyond that victim not wanting to cooperate, especially if you've been able to establish sufficient probable cause that that individual has been trafficked. King, were you able to unmute?
Yes, sir. I'm here. How you doing?
Did you want to elaborate on that any?
Yes, when it comes to the victims of human trafficking, we don't have to go through the DA's office to get any paperwork started. We can go straight to an advocacy center. I typically use a Georgia advocacy center. I do my paperwork. They set up the forensic interviews. We attend the forensic interviews. I would sometimes have defects in attendance, as well as somebody from the DA's office. And when you go through the advocacy center, this is where all the resources start. Everything is there. Your whole case can be laid out right there. Whatever that child needs, medical, placement, therapy, everything's right there. It's a one-stop shop. And a lot of people need to use the advocacy centers more often, because a lot of the state and national resources go through them. And this is how it all starts right here through that center. So it's really an easy process. Just go ahead and that forensic interview is key. Get the forensic interview completed, and we go from there.
I think the question, though, Joseph, was what happens when you have an uncooperative parent in the process?
So I've had that in the past, and just like you said, what I would do, I went through the state courts. I got court orders signed by a superior court judge. Once you get those court orders signed, you have to do it then. If not, now you can get yourself in a position where that parent could be taken into custody. Now DFATs can go pick that child up, and that child's come to that forensic interview. It's done.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Detective King. I've been hearing about you all night, so it's great to hear from you directly.
Thank you.
And now the SOARs have your information for the next panel. So we have a couple questions that have come through, and we don't have very long before we start to wrap up, but about Facebook. And again, I keep steering us back to technology, because technology has been an increasing contributor to this issue for a long time now. But now that we've been locked in with COVID for quite a few years now, everything has moved online, right? Shopping has moved online for goods, groceries, and unfortunately, humans as well. So I want to invite Ms. Foster to share the questions that you have about Facebook, and we'll see how much we can get into.
Yep, actually they were coming from people who are watching via Facebook. And it was, how often are trafficked victims coerced into consenting, and what happens to them? Are they then criminalized?
That's a great question for Chief Meadows or King.
That's one of the reasons that I think it's important, and one of the things, one of the cultures that we really had to change in law enforcement, looking at these women or these people as victims as opposed to criminals. Now, does that mean that in every case you would not pursue criminal charges. That's not what I'm suggesting. It really depends on the level of the crime that's been committed. Sometimes you have people that are active participants in violent crimes that are human trafficking victims, and then you don't have the luxury of kind of turning the other way. So in those instances, it's really going to depend on the level of involvement under those circumstances. And so in some cases, you want to save them from being criminalized. If the circumstances allow it, you certainly have the ability to do that. We have officers' discretion with a lot of these charges, and when many of them are just simply idling and loitering or maybe prostitution, you really want to err on the side of caution and treat them more as victims as opposed to criminals in those cases. But it's really going to be to the level of their involvement given the circumstances.
Thank you. And just to give some historic information about that, Senate Bill 8, also known as the Safe Harbor or Rachel's Law legislation, really brought that about in 2015 into law when I think it was Governor Deal signed it into law, extending the statute of limitations for child sex trafficking victims from age 23 to 25, as well as ensuring that law enforcement is properly trained to identify victims as victims and not as criminals. And so there's been a big push in Georgia as well as nationally to make sure that victims are treated as victims and receiving the kind of services that shelters can provide. And so one of the reasons that you keep seeing hotlines in the chat rather than perhaps direct calls to 911 is because hotlines have been trained to work directly with law enforcement. So their very first call will be law enforcement, but they're properly approaching the issue from a help perspective and a resources perspective rather than a penal perspective. And I think that we can definitely say for the Atlanta area and in Georgia, law enforcement has been trained very much more since 2015 as a result of the Safe Harbor law. So we are coming up on time, and I want to give each of our panelists a moment to conclude with any final thoughts, 60 seconds or less for each of you, but I know some things may be burning in your mind or questions that you didn't get to chime in on, or even resources that you want to bring attention to for those that are in the audience. If there's something you want to share that you don't have time to get into, please feel free to drop links, contact information, and email addresses in the chat. And so we can start the same way that we were introduced with Representative Bazemore.
Thank you so very much. And I want to thank everybody that's on the panel and the Deltas for inviting. This issue is so important to everybody. And I'm glad that we tonight have concentrated more on the cities, but we understand now that it is a state issue. And if you don't have the state behind you, it's going to be difficult to get things done. So I just want to offer myself as a resource because I'm already working on it with those that can make a difference. And I want to continue to work with you all to get things done. Whatever you see, whatever suggestions, whatever bills we can get passed, please make that suggestion. And also, I just want to make sure that you know, I've heard about training. So the First Lady also has, under the Grace Commission, 30-minute free human trafficking awareness training for anybody, employees, anybody on the ground, anybody. So that is available to you also. So let's work together because this is about these children and some adults, to make sure our streets are safe and our children, our family members are safe.
Thank you very much. Mayor Dial.
Thank you so much. And I'll be honest, I've learned tonight, and I'm grateful for that. It's been, I want to thank Kathy Adams for inviting me to join you all tonight. And I admire those of you who are the champions of this attacking this problem, and those who've been on it for 20 years or so. And I'm going to be meeting with my county school superintendent. I'm going to be meeting with homeowners associations and that kind of thing to make sure that our community is on top of this. And we're going to continue to have conversations with law enforcement here locally. and it's I don't want any child to or adult to be taken advantage of on my watch, and you all have really helped open my eyes more to this problem. So I want to thank you again for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you so very much. Next, I'd like to invite Councilwoman Role.
Yes, real quick. Thank you to Delta Sigma Theta for being out front and out loud on purpose on this issue, and partnering with me over the many years to educate residents. I want to thank every level of government who is doing everything they can to combat this issue. Look, one of the things that you can do is if you live in a city, and this is not a local ordinance to hang the sign, talk to your elected officials, talk to your city council person, talk to your mayor, and tell them to legislate a policy to hang the sign in all businesses, in all park and recreation facilities, especially gas stations. Quick Trip is a safe haven for human sex trafficking victims. Remember that. And that's one of the reasons I love Quick Trip. Make sure that you hold your elected officials accountable in your cities. Right now, I do know that Stephanie Gordon has taken this issue on in East Point. Marcy Overstreet has taken it on in Atlanta, and I have taken it on in South Fulton. But we need all cities, all 538 cities in Georgia to take this on. But definitely we need all of our Metro Atlanta cities to take this on. And if you see something, say something. Remember, our kids are not for sale and our kids are not prostitutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, Chief Meadows.
You know, again, I want to thank Delta Sigma Theta for hosting this event tonight. You know, the biggest thing that we have is education when it comes to fighting this crime. And if we get the word out about what to look for, what's expected, and things of that nature, then it helps law enforcement, like I said earlier, put the pieces of the puzzle together. We don't have the luxury of operating in silos when it comes to this issue, because everything that happens in the city of South Fulton, it's happening in Tyrone, it's happening in Peachtree City, it's happening, you know, in other places. And these criminals have created networks. I remember we had one investigation in Atlanta where we followed a trafficker all the way to Selma, Alabama, where he had a stable of women that he was bringing back and forth from Atlanta, back and forth to Atlanta. And so if we understand that they've created networks, then we have to be prepared to sit down, educate ourselves, and create networks throughout the state of Georgia and throughout the country to help combat this issue. Because right now, I'm afraid that many of our governments are operating in silos, and that's not doing anyone any favors when it comes to trying to tackle this issue head on.
Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic discussion. I appreciate the variety of perspectives brought here by Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated in the choosing of these panelists. And just want to reiterate my thanks to each of you as public servants in the way that you are raising this issue on a local level and partnering with those around you to really bring this issue to the forefront of conversation, to continue to keep it in the dialogue, whether it be in the State House or the City Council, in towns connected to all the highways or in towns that are smaller and off the highways, because this issue does not discriminate and it touches every part of the globe. So thank you so much. And I will drop my information in the chat as well. I apologize to anyone I didn't get to respond to directly, but do feel free to keep in touch, and I'll hand it back to the sorors of Delta Sigma Theta.
Good evening. Greetings, everyone. My name is Kathy Adams, and I am the chair of the Social Action Committee. We partnered along with our International Awareness and Involvement Committee to host this event this evening. This was part 2 of a series that we had. So I want to first of all say thank you to all of the participants who participated in the event this evening, and to the guests, our volunteers who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this happen. But thank you to everyone just for joining and listening in. This would not have been possible or successful without you being engaged, and just your interest in the topic and joining us was just, we know that the goal was met. Together, we own the responsibility of educating the public and about this growing challenge, about its predators, its victims, and the repeat offenders. We may not have the solutions right away. However, onus is always on us to remember, as Councilwoman Role said, if you see something, say something, and together, let's work to make it stop. And because your opinion really matters to us most, we'd like you to take another minute and a half to complete an online survey. And our volunteers will drop the link to the online survey in the chat box. And if you will, give us some feedback. Let us know how much you enjoyed this, how informative it was to you, or if there was something that we could have done a little bit better. But we'd love to hear from you. And again, thank you for joining us this evening. Take care. Greetings.